Welcome to Love Bites. Love Bites. Love Bites. Love Bites. By Dr. Tara, your destination for sexual wellness and mindful relationship advice. Hope you're having an orgasmic day.
Do you want to become sexually powerful? If the answer is yes, go to lovebites.co and check out 30 Days to My Best Sexy Self, a Sexual Mindfulness Journal. This ebook will change your life. In this sexual mindfulness journal, I offer the tried and true methods to become more sexually confident. It's for everyone who wants to have the best sex life possible. Hi, loves, and Happy New Year. In this new year, I wanted to start our conversation and talking about expectations because I think a lot of relationships, either the success or the failure, and I mean, there's no bad failure, right? We all learn. They're typically from this understanding or misunderstanding of expectations when it comes to relationship and sex. So today, we're having a conversation with my dear friend who is also a relational communication professor at Utah Tech University, Dr. James B. Stein. Hi, James.
Yeah, Utah Tech, baby.
Awesome.
Technically, it's not until July 1st, but whatever. I'm waiting on the bumper sticker in the mail.
Awesome. All right. Well, so James and I did our PhD together in human communication, and James similarly studies close relationships, specifically recently romantic relationships, right? And he teaches relational communication, which is communication within relationships. And that's one of the most important things ever. And I've been teaching sexual communication. So it really goes together, this like sex and relationship conversation between us. So
yeah.
Like I said in the intro, I wanted to talk about expectations. I also want to know, loves, for people who are listening, are you in your 20s? Are you in your 30s, 40s, 50s? So we're in our 30s. And this conversation started with us brainstorming what are some really interesting topics to talk about when it comes to sex and relationship. And we realized that our expectations in relationships and in sex has changed quite drastically, and we're better at communicating them as well from our 20s. So I wanted to talk about that. How do you think, what's like the first thing that comes to your mind when I ask you about your like relational expectation in your 30s?
I think like the first thing that comes to mind is like how cringy my 20s were in terms of dating.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, versus like how they are now. Like I just remember being in my 20s and like being on Tinder and like looking at the bio that I was trying to type out and being like, I need to type this in a way that like the ladies that I'm going out with don't think that I'm only trying to have sex. But then like, I don't want them thinking that I'm going to like be overly crushing on them and then like get obsessed with them. When I'm in my 30s, I'm like, yo, I'm just going to like, here's like information about me. And like, this is like who I am. And like, this is what I'm about. I think part of that comes with like feeling like you're more established, which I do think tends to come in your 30s rather than in your 20s. So maybe it's some of that, but it's just so much.
Yeah.
There's so much less noise now that I'm in my 30s.
Yeah. You know, I actually collected data and I did my recent study. I looked at sexual confidence. So it's not like life confidence in general. It's very specific to the sexual realm. But there was a correlation between sexual confidence and age, which makes so much sense to me because as a woman, and like, you know, in my 20s, I did not have the same sexual confidence that I have now. And in fact, I was talking to one of my friends that I had sex with in my early 20s. And he was asking me like, are you still uncomfortable with your guy going down on you? Because he's like, I remember you were so uncomfortable about that. And now you have this podcast and your tagline has become sexually powerful. like how did that come to be? Like, how do you feel about that now? I'm like, oh yeah. Now I'm like, yeah, give it to me, baby. I'll wait. You know, you can go down on me 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes. I'll wait. Like I deserve pleasure. And if my partner wants to give me pleasure and if he gets pleasure from it too, like I have no problem with that. But I remember when I was in my early 20s and how kind of uncomfortable I felt when people were going down on me. And I think like that resonates with this data that I collected, the correlation between sexual confidence and age.
Dude, I agree. When I was younger, I was like so actively against performing cunnilingus. I'm gonna stay scientific with my terminology.
Yes,
But
yes.
I was like, I would never like, and then at one point I just did it and I was like, wait a minute, this is like the thing that I like really didn't want to do so badly. It's just like kissing a downstairs mouth. Like,
Yeah, I like
like
that. Kissing a downstairs mouth.
I was like, this really isn't that bad. And then I learned that like sometimes, like that was another thing. I was like, oh, if I go down on my partner once, they're always gonna want it every single time. And then like sometimes people are like, no, this is gonna be like a 5-minute affair. I've got things to do today also.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so like that's something else that I wanted to bring up. When I was younger, I was under the impression that my partner wanted me to perform for like hours or more at a time. And that like, unless like I brought my partner to climax like 4, 5, 6 times, I was failing to meet expectations. And I think a lot of that comes from like
porn.
Yeah, like the unrealistic expectations, since we're talking about that porn can result in. And also like this, what we talked about last time with this like toxic bro culture of like, bro, you don't know how to please your woman. Unless your woman is like doing this and that and the other thing, you're not really pleasing her. And I think that sort of like vibe is so bad. Like because like I think about it and I'm like, I don't want to have 5 orgasms in one sexual experience every single time. You know what I mean?
Can a man have 5 orgasms in one sexual encounter?
I mean, with enough practice, anything is possible. But
I don't know.
You know what I'm saying?
Though, it's like medically possible.
I mean, look, without divulging too much about my own practices, there. I mean, like for example, like tantric sex can do that sort of thing. But but yeah, at the end of the day, like having those like long, intense sexual explorations are cool. And also it's nice to just like get some stuff done sometimes.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes you just want to get that need met and then
I'm a fan. I'm a fan of all kinds of sexual encounters. I'm a fan of a quickie. I'm a fan of long, tantric, pleasure-based, no orgasm sex. I'm a fan of multiple orgasm sex. I'm a fan of maintenance, like 10-minute sex. I'm a fan of all kinds of sex. I think sex is just amazing and it allows you to not only feel good and experience all those feel good hormones, but I think even like the quick maintenance sex with your partner, it allows for this continuous connection, like this energy that you have between you and your partner that tends to get lost if you haven't had sex a long time. So what are other like relational expectations do you have? The first thing that came to my mind is it has to be a man with high emotional intelligence. If it's a man that throws tantrum or saying like snarky things and a man that doesn't like process emotions, shut down or stonewall or like just leave the room without, communicating with me. And another thing is like what a low emotional intelligent man would do is gaslighting me like, oh, you're crazy or like you're thinking too much. Like I will not stand men like this. And I mean, of course, like people like this because it's just a waste of time to me. And it signals to me, you, sir, need some growing to do and some introspection and like growth within you that you need even before you couple up with anybody. So
absolutely. No doubt. And like this kind of like, again, this kind of like gets to like the whole like masculinity, femininity thing of like, oh, like how is a man supposed to act? Like in my 20s, I had this like picture in my head of like what like a man ought to look like and how they ought to act. And like all that is like such a deviation from who the best version of yourself often is, like myself included. Like I remember when I was in college, like I wanted to be like a big buff weightlifter. And we talked about this last time. It's just not going to happen. Like that's not my body style, but I can find other ways to become, not to pat myself on the back, but like, exceedingly good looking and do things that allow me to embrace my masculinity and also embrace my femininity and my androgyny. I think that that's a cool thing to do. Like, for example, right now I got my nails painted. I don't know if you can see, I got my nails painted.
Love
I painted
it.
my own nails, for the first time. Just the other day. I would have never that would have shattered my frail, like hyper masculine ego in my 20s. They would have been like, I can't be seen with nail polish. But now I just treat it like jewelry. Like it's pretty cool. I like it.
Yeah. It's almost like your creative expression. I love that. Do you think your culture has something to do with like the way you view masculinity and maybe like your like provider status and like this like really manly man, like being Jewish?
Oh, I mean, definitely American culture. I think that like, I'm going to say East Coast culture. And when I say East Coast culture, I do mean a culture that it has a lot of heavy Jewish influence in it.
Right.
Isn't as dramatically hyper masculine as, say, for example, like Texas masculinity. Like those are two very different types of masculinity. But I think you bring up a good point. Like culture plays an important role in terms of what we can expect from our partners and what we think they expect from us from like a provider standpoint or like a quote unquote manliness standpoint. Like when do you become the provider? When is it time to be like a little bit more domineering versus a little bit more nurturing? And I think that here in American society, we have this horrible conflation of like, oh, I'm supposed to be acting this one way because I watched, I don't know, like a Sylvester Stallone movie that told me that this is what a man looks like.
Wow, that's interesting. So this masculine feminine energy thing, I've had this conversation with a lot of my friends. And one of the things that I have said that some of my friends disagree is I want to be with a partner who I feel has more masculine energy than like feminine energy. And let me explain that. So I feel that a lot of times I'm very assertive and quote unquote, I exhibit some like domineering, some like this traditional like masculine energy, right? I can be very assertive. I can be very loud. I can be very like demanding. But at the same time, and this is what I say, and you can tell me how you feel about this. I want to feel protected. I want to feel like taken care of and protected as well while being this badass bitch that I am. You know? Yeah, but like some of my female friends are like, well, but you're a badass independent bitch. Like you don't need this person to be taking care of you, to protect you. Like you're good on your own, girl. But like, is it bad that I admit that I want a man who can protect me, who provides, who, I feel has this like masculine energy that surrounds me? Like, what do you think about that?
I think that I'm going to flip it on its head. I think you're looking at it. I don't think you've got it wrong. I think you've got it right. I just think you're wording it wrong, because I think what you're looking for is somebody who has a balance of masculine and feminine characteristics. Like you want somebody who can be controlling and present and strong, and also somebody who can be nurturing and caregiving. And so like this idea of like providing, when people say a man should be a provider, I think that can mean a lot of different things. That can mean you go out and you work 80 hours a week to feed your family. It can also mean that you provide your partner with like a feeling of safety and protection just with your presence. Like my girlfriend was telling me about something that she and her friends colloquially called the ick. Have you ever heard of the ick?
Nope. So
like the ick, I think it's like a younger millennial Gen Z thing. The ick is like when you're hanging out with a guy. This is like from what I know, this is like a completely like one-sided experience for women. You're hanging out with a guy and he does like a red flag thing, not a traditional red flag thing. Like, but he'll be like, I don't know. He'll be like, oh, well, like, that's just because like you're a woman, you wouldn't understand. And it gives you the ick. And then like once you've got the ick, you never see him the same way again.
Wow.
Yes. So like, and
we have the academic term for this. Isn't it like kind of like the glass shattered? Like the rose color glasses shattered?
Yes, it is when it's or you might call it the pedestal effect, right? After the halo effect comes the pedestal effect. So like, and the reason I bring the ick up is because I think it helps to explain how you can get into this like situation where a person acts in a certain way that you weren't expecting them to based on what you know about them. And all of a sudden your preconceived notions about them are turned on their head. And I think that, like most things, if you're with somebody who is acting in moderation, who has a balance of masculine and feminine qualities, that it feels right. Like if you're like, yes, this person is like loving and caring and also strong and can provide and is protecting and that sort of thing. But like, yeah, when you say that, I didn't hear that you're looking for somebody who's only masculine.
Right.
What I heard is you're looking for somebody who has a bounty of masculinity and femininity and knows how and when to apply pressure with each.
Exactly, Dr. James Stein. You got this. Yeah. Nice summary of what I want. See, I needed a man to say something. Just kidding. Just kidding, y'all. Just kidding. He merely just summarized what I already know. But okay, what about you? What are some other relational expectations now that is different from your 20s?
Yeah, so like this is something that I talk about a lot. I talk about life chapter. When I was in college or even in grad school, and my life was more like transient. You know what I mean? Like I didn't know, like when we were at ASU, you don't know where you're going to end up.
Right.
And so I was always sort of detached from the idea of like a long-term committed relationship. But also I was detached from the idea of like, I was detached from the idea of acting in a way that best suits who I am in my life chapter and what I'm looking for. And so now that I'm like a little bit more settled, I'm like, okay, what am I looking for? I'm looking for somebody who matches my life chapter, someone who's settled, someone who is like, I'm junior faculty. So like, you know, somebody who's like maybe not entry level position, but like, you know, middle management, making decent money, able to provide for themselves and be independent. But also looking for somebody who can, like you said, get into that space, make them feel safe, you know, bring mutual value to a relationship, and also just kind of like vibe. Like, you know what I'm saying? Just like somebody who is independent enough to want to hang out with me, but not need to hang out with me. And I didn't understand that that's what I was looking for. Maybe I wasn't ready to be looking for that sort of thing when I was younger.
Yeah. Oh, I want to probe that. The want to hang out with me, but don't need to hang out with me, because that's the difference with people in their 20s. Because I remember, and this was like when I was really young, maybe like 21, 22, I felt like I needed to hang out with my partner all the time. Like I needed to be with my boyfriend all the time. And if, you know, if we weren't spending so much time together, then I started to feel insecure. And all of that is like such an early 20s problem for me, because like now I don't have that problem at all. Now I see this separation at times very healthy. Times where I'm only with my friends, times where, you know, we take separate trips with our friends or family. Like, I think it's amazing. But that's the difference, is when you're in your 20s, and there are people that told me, like, you know, I feel bad if my partner, like, I feel bad if my girlfriend goes out with her friends, or I feel bad if my boyfriend's like playing video games with his friends. I'm like, well, maybe you should get your own thing too. Like,
right.
You know, have like a passionate hobby. Something that I know that your passionate hobby is wiffle ball, right? Is it still wiffle ball?
No, that is my passionate life journey.
Okay.
Like,
so it's more intense than a hobby.
Yeah, my hobby, like I like Pokemon Snap is a hobby that I like.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But you're passionate about. But that's like my point is, like, maybe if you have something of your own that you feel secure about and that you're invested in, you wouldn't feel so insecure about your partner spending time with other people in a healthy way.
Yeah, well, and I think that that's kind of like part of, and I'm not saying that everybody who enters their 30s is like this, or anyone who's in their 20s isn't.
Right.
But like, there comes a point in your life where you get to, like, you know, ideally, right, you get to a point where you're like, okay, I'm feeling at least moderately fulfilled by my
Mm-hmm.
profession.
Mm-hmm.
I am like, I know where I'm living. I've got some meaningful people in my life. I've got some things that I like to do, things that spark joy in my life. And once you get to that place, you often find that there's a lot of self-love that comes with that. And when you're able to embrace that self-love and, have your own thing, you want to do your own thing. And you
Yes.
also want to share that thing with someone else. And then you
Right.
also want to be with that someone else and not do the thing. It's like, it's juggling all the various elements of your life. And like a good juggler, when you're doing it right, it looks really fucking cool.
Yeah, totally. And I have some students that are like, oh, like I'm really attached to my boyfriend. I just want to be with him all the time. Like, I go to his practice, like basketball. I go to his practice. I go to this and that. I'm like, okay, but what about your thing? Like, do you have your thing? Because like he can't be your life. Like,
yeah, that's how you get into like some of those like unhealthy attachment styles. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
Can't have
And
that.
I've been trying to tell her that that's unhealthy in ways that's not like damaging.
Well, no, because it's also good to go like support. Like if I like one time I brought Sarah, my girlfriend, with me when I was playing wiffle ball in my league. And I told her, I was like, this is going to be boring. You're going to hate it. There's not going to be a whole lot to do. And it was. And she did. And there wasn't a lot to do, all those things respectively. And at the end of it, I was like, sorry that I made you sit through that. She's like, no, it's okay. I could tell you really enjoyed it. And like, that made me feel good. Cause I was like, oh, she was like willing to like, but yeah, no, if you make your partner's hobby, your hobby, like if you become your partner's personal cheerleader, that is, I don't know. There's a line between like,
that's
I
a red flag.
Supportive and yeah, I'm going to be obsessive. Like, I think that you got to balance that carefully.
I think a good sign of that is how you spend your time. If your time is 100% about your partner, that's not good. That's a
like your time,
red flag.
like you time.
Right.
Right. Because there's partner time too. But if you time is also partner time, that's trouble.
Yeah. Yeah. Like definitely have your own thing. I was talking to one of my friends who is a pretty successful like real estate person here in LA. And she's a very confident, real estate agent. And she told me, when she was younger, she would have this sense of like, oh, I want to go with my boyfriend everywhere. We want to like not only the couple's things, but also individual things of his. Like she wants to be there. But then now she's like, oh no, oh, hell no. Like, I have my own shit. I have my like it's a great like healthy balance. When we have a together time, it's amazing. But when we also have separate alone time where we pursue our passion. And that is my next point is now in my 30s, I know clearly what my passions are. And I pursue them quite rigorously. This is something that I didn't have in my 20s.
Same. I think that, again, that comes with natural growth.
Life experience.
Yeah, exactly. And like, I also think that it's worth noting that like, when you take control in that way, when you're able to like organize and execute, like those are very masculine qualities that I think many women are taught to run away from. I think it's taught less, right? But I think that society often teaches women not to, be as aggressive or as domineering. And I think that doing that can be a really good thing because that can bring you to the point where you figure out shit about yourself. And so, like, I'm not saying like, to the ladies listening to this, I'm not saying that you have to be like machismo or anything, but I think that understanding that every person, not to keep coming back to it, but like every person fluctuates on a variety of masculine and feminine characteristics. And if you can embrace the best of both of those, things tend to get more fulfilling rather than if you like lurch to one extreme or the other.
For sure. And, learning to become more assertive has served me so well in various aspects of life, in business, in work, in personal relationships, in friendships with family, and like in sex too. So with that being said, is there like a sexual expectation or sexting that has changed for you from your 20s?
Well, I mean, I already kind of talked a little bit about how, I don't always necessarily want to go forever, but I feel now like I'm more capable of reading the needs of my partner. And I think that's an experience thing. Yeah, I think that's just an experience thing that you learn with time. You date someone else, you play the single life for a little bit, get into another relationship, become single again. and you learn about, for example, the fact that like everybody has different sexual needs, and that
Mhm.
if you can, pay close attention and be like,
Mhm.
be adherent to the requests of your partner in that moment, that it becomes very fulfilling in a lot of different ways,
Mhm.
um, both sexually and relationally. So yeah, like I don't feel so lost
Mhm. Mhm.
anymore.
Yeah, do you feel like this like centeredness and like confidence?
Yeah, I suppose that's another thing. Oh my God, wait. One other thing that I learned in my 30s is that, like, all right, I'm going to word this delicately, but sometimes, especially for gentlemen, things move a little bit too quickly. There's a little bit of friction that you weren't expecting, and things release prematurely, right? So that can happen. And there used to be a time where, like, that was my greatest fear. I'm like, lean real close. That was my greatest fear. There was nothing more like emasculating than the idea of
Premature
prematurely,
ejaculation?
yeah, of prematurely finishing. And like in my 30s, like there have been times where that's happened and I've just been like,
Mhm.
oopsie. And then like
Mhm.
you get back to business. You know what I'm saying? Like you
Hell
get back to like
yeah.
doing what you're doing, and like it's okay for that sort of thing to happen. You tell your partner about it and you're like, this happened. So like maybe we could just like make out for a little bit and then I'll be good to go in like 5 to 7 minutes.
Yes. Yes. Uh, thank God you mentioned that because I feel like there's so much anxiety surrounding men being able to perform and is attached to like how long they can last.
Yeah.
You know, when in fact like you know like men with like penises, you can come and then you can relax and enjoy sensuality with your partner and pleasure them and
Mhm.
make and then you get hard again.
Well, here's
Like,
the other thing. I think for a lot of men, when men finish, I think that there's like a bodily release. And then I think
mhm,
that there's also this like expectation. Some people call it post nut clarity. It's really just like, I think it's not, I think it's the opposite of clarity. I think what happens is after that, a lot of men have guilt, like
mm,
extreme guilt that they either didn't perform or that they violated their masculine norms, or that like, if for example, for like, religious folks, like they,
mhm,
what they just did was an affront to God. And so I
mhm.
think that they feel this very extreme guilt that makes it that, okay, now I'm done. I don't want to do it anymore. And like, for me, it was like the feeling of being like
Mhm.
inadequate. And eventually I said, screw it. I'm like, sometimes this happens. And that made the experience so much better and so much more relaxing. And then it turns out that
Yes.
like, I've never met a single person who was bothered by it.
Nope.
Not one
Nope.
single woman who I've been with relationally or sexually has ever been like, oh, I wish you could just like control it a little bit better. Like no one's ever said that.
No, and actually, most grown-up women will say like that's actually pretty hot because it's like you're super into me. Like you were
Yeah.
so turned on, you were so aroused. Like I was so sexy, like you couldn't even control yourself. Like you came immediately. Like that's pretty hot. And then after this, instead of, you know, obsessing over like this guilt and like being basically absorbed by your guilt, perhaps shift your perspective, focus on your partner, pleasure her, and then through that pleasure and connection, you'll probably get hard again. And if not, you know what? There's so many things you can do for her. So, like,
Yeah.
yeah,
There are
there are
videos to
so
be
many
watched,
different
folks. Like,
ways. There's so many different ways. So, yeah, I hope this is a PSA for all men. Like, don't feel bad. Like, this is okay. Get back in the game. Also, just don't like obsess over it or get upset. And like another thing too, like, don't say things like, "Oh, this never happened." Like, there's no point
yeah,
like
bitch, that shit happened.
justifying. Oh yeah, like it's like this masculinity part, right? Like where you have
Right.
to justify your premature ejaculation. You don't have to. Focus on me. Focus on
Yeah.
your woman instead, or man, like whatever
And
sexual orientation. Just focus on your partner instead. Become a generous lover. If we're all like focusing on each other and have this like, passionate, consumed, focused, attentive sexual activity, like it's all gonna go well.
yeah. And like, all right, one other thing about this, because there's this awesome study from the mid 2000s that looked at sexual satisfaction and the things that are most likely to predict sexual satisfaction. And what they found is that the factor that most strongly predicts sexual satisfaction is the extent to which we're willing to communicate with our partner about our sexual dislikes. It's also the conversation that people are least likely to have and have the most anxiety about having, which is understandable. Here's what I'm going to propose, especially to the gentlemen listening. Have that conversation and say, like, what are some of the things that you don't like in bed? Not even some of the things I do. What are some of the things that you don't like in bed?
general?
In general, for example, I don't like kissing with tongue. I'm really not into it. It is a instant turn off. There's a time here and there I like to do, but like I make that really clear right out of the gate. Anyway, the point is, have that conversation, and I will personally mail you a brand new, crisp $100 bill. If you ask your lady, what don't you like in bed? And she says, you know what I really hate? I hate when you bust too fast.
No one would ever say that.
Says that, I will send it to your PO box. Guaranteed. No chance. But it's something that men are unbelievably insecure about.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, there are a lot of women as well with low emotional intelligence, childish, insecure. They perhaps would say that, but they need to like learn and grow like within themselves too, you know? Like I said, going back to that, like introspection and self-love and self-growth, like all of that needs to happen. But
yeah, you can't, I mean, immaturity can be fixed.
Right. It totally can. Awesome. Yeah. I wanted to say that too, that my new study also found the same thing. Sexual communication was the strongest predictor of sexual satisfaction. And I think,
of course,
on and on again, this has become like the research finding that is a pattern within like sexuality studies and sexual communication studies. Yet there's so many people on TikTok that are so against this. And I know this because I read the comment section and they're against this. They're like, sex is something you do, not something you say or talk about. I'm like, oh my gosh, when can we change this? When can you grow up and learn that sexual communication is extremely important in long-term relationships?
And in short-term relationships.
And in short-term, in relationships in general, there is no good relationship can exist without sexual communication.
That like, I'm picturing like, I can't even imagine what the sex would be like if you never talked about the things that you like and don't like. It's like, I'm picturing someone walking into a room and all the lights are off and there's a single hole in one of the walls. And it's like, okay, go find the hole. And it's like, okay, I'll try, but I don't know what to look for or where to look for it.
I know, right? But those of you that are listening, you are learning, and I appreciate you so much for being here and listening to this podcast and learning with me and growing with me. It is a great journey. So Dr. James Stein, just like last time and like my every episode, we do a little game segment to end this episode. And today we're going to play 10 quickies with Dr. Tara. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. So any first reaction? Number 1, porn.
Moderation.
Number 2, insecurity.
Normal.
Number 3, sexual confidence.
Learned.
Oh, yeah. Number 4, using a vibrator while penetrating.
Recommended.
Ooh, yes. Snaps. Number 5, sex parties.
Approach carefully.
Number 6, threesomes.
Approach equally as carefully, but for different reasons.
Number 7, alpha males.
Imagined.
Number 8, OnlyFans.
I'm going to go with dollar bills, y'all. Make that money.
Power to you. Number 9, choking.
Oh, you're restricting blood flow, not airflow.
And last but not least, number 10, misguided TikTok relationship gurus.
Tag me.
I love it. Before you go, the plugs. Anything.
The plugs. Yeah, I mean, you can find me on TikTok, of course, Juices for J3WCIFER. I leapfrogged you again. I went on a swell. I'm like this close to 100K now.
Love.
It's gonna happen where you're gonna jump me again, and then I'm gonna jump you, and then you're gonna jump me. I can feel it. I can feel it.
Awesome. Well, y'all, I will have Dr. James Stein's information in this episode description as well. Happy New Year. It's 2022. It's time to move forward in life with this positive attitude, with our sexual confidence, with amazing, passionate relationships. So let's get to it. Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being here, Dr. James Stein. And thank you for y'all for listening. I really appreciate you. Let's grow our community together. Let's become sexually powerful together and have an orgasmic day. How amazing would it be if you don't have to hold your vibrator? Let me introduce you to Eva by Dame, hands-free vibrator. Eva is a hands-free, waterproof couples vibrator that gives you clitoral stimulation during penetrative sex. You're gonna feel so good while Eva stays out of the way so you can focus on the moment. Use the link in this episode's description to the product page and use my discount code Dr. Tara for 10% off. Have an orgasmic time.
Thanks for listening. This was Love Bites. Love Bites. By Dr. Tara. Follow Dr. Tara on social media at lovebites.co. Have an orgasmic day.